There was a sequence of breaths that for the first time, I touched home again. I touched the divine, I touched Father, I touched Mother, I touched the eternal that lives in each one of us. I remember opening my eyes and saying, "Mother, I'm home." And she came rushing over to me and she said, "Son, you never left."
I am Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher 33, professional wellness and sovereignty coach, practical mystic, entertainer, and warrior of truth and the grand illusion. And today I have the privilege of speaking with Jonathan Johnson, writer, philosopher, researcher, master of the ancient sciences and lost wisdom, my good friend.
Jason, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I watched not too long ago, you cut the most epic promo on the dark forces that are manipulating the matrix of consciousness that most people call reality. But also in this video, you reference your belief in the human spirit and hope in the triumphant power within and the potential for great human sovereignty. And I've had the privilege of working with you in one of these specific practices that cultivates the spirit, this practice of breath work. That was my first introduction to you.
I remember.
And I remember at that time, Wim Hof was getting a lot of attention in the public, and there was a lot of buzz around his breathing method, his ability to alter his mind and his physiology and achieve what seemed to be just these superhuman feats. And then when I saw someone locally was offering this practice and then heard stories as well of people just having these intense cathartic experience from this practice, I wanted to try it for myself. And at this point, like, I was struggling with my own feelings of limitation. There was a hunger in me to be something more, but I felt weighed down, I felt burdened and heavy, and was in a time of serious doubt, crossroads. And when I took part in this practice with you, I felt this clarity open up and a peace that was few and far between in experiences in my life. Could you tell me a little bit more about this particular technique of breath work that you shared with me and shared with the community?
The breathing technique that I used when you first came to see us is something that I developed over, it took me about 4 or 5 years. I was breathing every single morning for about an hour to 2 hours every morning. During that process, it was a stage in my life where I was completely broken. I remember I was actually here in this studio. I had no answers. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. And I was ready to check out and go home. I'd had enough of this place. I mean, the horrors I've seen, the pain, the other types of forces that always continually opposed me just got to be too much. So I remember lying there on the floor, and I was legitimately deciding how I was going to go home. And I remember thinking, okay, so you're going to check out, you're going to leave here, you're going to go back home to your father and your mother in the eternal realm, and you're going to stand before them and you're going to say, okay, I couldn't do it, Dad. I'm sorry, I didn't have it in me. I didn't have any more strength. I had nothing left to give. And so I'm sorry I failed you. And then I remember thinking the only thing I'd be able to do in that instance was to just disappear, to go off into oblivion and become non-existent, to take away my reference point. as a pinpoint of spirit. And I remember thinking, okay, how does that feel? How is that going to go over with you? Does that satisfy you? And I remember thinking, no, it doesn't. Because that isn't a way. And so what I did instead, I said, well, I don't know what to do then. What do I do? And I said, well, you can do something. There's one thing you can do. When all else fails you, you breathe. So I remember lying there and I couldn't do anything else. I was exhausted, shattered. So I just started breathing. And I thought, this is the way. And I remembered it from ancient times, from other past lives I have lived, where I'd use this technique when it got really, it was like when I'm up against the wall and there's no other way out. And it became futile. This is what I would do. And it took me a long time to really flesh this out over the eons. But this particular instance, I just started breathing and allowing myself to go inside because there was nowhere else left to go. I had no other options outside. So I went in and started letting the breath show me the way. Often a way I describe it with the breath, it's like watching, when you see incense burning, and you see that pillar of smoke rising and twisting, that's exactly what the breath is. It's like it's a twisting and turning and it's, you never know what to do or how to do it. You just start breathing and then you allow the breath to guide you through the process. And what happened was, is as I continued to breathe, it started to show me the pain that I was feeling. It started to open up and give awareness to, where it was all coming from. And so I went deeper and deeper. And of course, in the beginning breath works, it was all about offloading. It was about a lot of weeping, a lot of wailing, a lot of severe agony and crying. And then the past lives started coming back to me. And they had before the breath work, which is part of the reason I was on my knees. But they started to come back in with greater clarity and started to show me what it was about. So I continued, I persevered deeper and deeper into the breath, and that of course took me deeper and deeper inside. And it took me through this long winding path of my inner self. And it took me from not knowing where I was or who I was to complete and total awareness, full awareness of who I was, and also what I was here to do. And then it even took me a step further, and I still remember, I have it in my journal, where there was, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a sequence of breaths that for the first time, I touched home again. I touched the divine, I touched Father, I touched Mother, I touched the eternal that lives in each one of us, inside of all of us. I call it the singularity or the 0 point or whatever you like as far as, titles. But it was home. And I still remember because when I was in the breath, I was fully cognizant of my body sitting in lotus. But when I did the breath hold that I perfected, I stepped through, and then I was able to see the real, which is, it's kind of like you're in the matrix here. This is all illusory. And I stepped out of this and into my divine self. I still remember that day. I kind of opened my eyes in the other, in the real. And I remember opening my eyes and saying, "Mother, I'm home." And she came rushing over to me and she said, "Son, you never left." And that was full stop for me. That was the moment when I realized that it was always within me, that the source, people call it heaven, paradise, all the different terms that people are using is within each and every one of us. And so when I said that, she came over and she said, you never left, son. You've always been here. And that's when I folded inside out. So my insides became my outsides and my outsides became my insides. I realized that I was all things and I was reunited or reacquainted with my eternal nature, and everything traded places. And from then on, I just kept perfecting that. But once you touch that, once you've touched the divine, once you go home within, there's no, it's that way from then on. And you have this sort of gravity that kind of anchors down in you. At the bottom of your heart space, that's where the singularity is. That's where the toroidal field comes up through the bottom of your heart and then comes out the top of your head and back through. And that singularity, that still point right at the very center of the vortex or the toroidal field, that place is eternal. That's the place from which everything comes and everything returns. And so when I was in that space, I was home again. And then I was able to reorient myself around the rest of it, around the rest of creation. So I got my gravity, got my center back. And from then on, it was just a sequence of perfecting the practice. And so the short of it is the breath is, like Wim Hof, you had mentioned, he's an amazing breathwork practitioner. He's been doing it for quite a while, a long time. And he's been through some very challenging things himself. So what he did is he turned that, the trauma that he went through, he turned that around, was able to find fuel, passion, and fire for something that transformed him. And then he was able to turn around and offer it to others. But the breath work that I do is the way of the one, or it's the source breath, is when you inhale, that brings in chi, prana, mana, whatever term you like for spirit, it brings it in. And then it rises to the top, which is your crown. And then when you exhale, it goes back down to the root. So a lot of what these people nowadays are talking about with Kundalini. So you can't just activate one. You have to do both. You have to activate the root, and then you have to systematically heal the chakras as you go up, which can take on many forms of trauma, from taking your power away to lack of mental insight, being able to see. All these different aspects are just the different chakras or the energy centers that are no longer functioning in optimal capacity. They've been diminished. It's like if you take a bell and you ring it and you kind of muffle it with a towel. That's basically what happens to most people's rainbow bridge or their chakra system. So anyway, when you breathe up to the top, you inhale, you hold, exhale down to the bottom, hold. You have to hold till it activates the center. And once it activates it, you get it from the root chakra, or the Kundalini, you get a rush of fiery energy that runs through your body. That's what Wim Hof is utilizing. And that causes the pituitary gland to stimulate, and it secretes a lot of hormones that are very advantageous to the physical body. But when you do the top breath, inhale all the way to the top and hold, when you master those two, you're beginning to master the process of the whole etheric body, physical body, mental body, and emotional body all rolled up into one. And it's a very grueling process. It was very difficult for me, very challenging. It took me, like I said, 4 or 5 years to master just that part. So,
well, yes, an amazing practice, and so much to unpack with all that you said. Tapping into source, healing trauma, alchemizing trauma. But let me back up. Let's focus on what you do, what you practice, and are offering is circular breath, which I found intense. You really had to work, and going in the first time, the tendency was wanting to quit, wanting to check out. It was intense physically and emotionally and spiritually. It really calls a lot out of a human to even go through that. And I experienced you being able to hold space for a whole group of people who wanted to check out that first time. Yeah. So could you expand a little bit on the circular breath?
The circular breath is like the beginning stage. So the beginning stage, you use the circular breath to purge. It basically taps into and draws out all the things inside of you that you haven't healed, traumas, things that have happened in your childhood, past lives. And it brings them, by cycling of the breath, it cycles out of the body, brings them from the rear brain to the fore, to help your mind assimilate and make sense of, and then release and let go. Because if you don't have awareness of the feelings, and then after the feelings, if you get further awareness of what caused it, it helps you to let go of it because it's not trapped in the subconscious mind. So once you bring it forward, process it out with each breath as you're breathing, it It releases it all from your body and from your emotional system. And like you said, it can be very challenging. That's just the first stage. The circular breath, I use that just to offload things, to get things cleared out of my way. But then it goes into other stages after that.
We do the long holds towards the end of
Yeah.
the breathing practice. But I found that more to be calming and grounding, where, as you said, with the circular breath, it brings out vivid imageries, pain, trauma. Now, I invited a fellow meditative practitioner to this event, but she declined. She said that her guru warned her of breath practices that awaken Kundalini prematurely before someone is ready to have this cathartic awakening. And there are stories of people who've been driven to madness, who've been ungrounded and off balance. How are you able to hold space for people with a practice that's that powerful to keep someone grounded?
However much you go through in your life path is basically ordering up or giving you the ability to handle more. So the things I've been through, all the different arrays of challenges, traumas, obstacles, all of those calibrated me and set me up to be able to hold space for anyone. And I mean, I have to go all the way across the board. You're not exempt as a true shamanism or true unity consciousness. People talk about unity consciousness. I think it's fun. The truth is, it's really quite brutal, because unity consciousness means whatever you're feeling, I'm going to feel. Whatever you experienced, I'm going to experience. See, so it's not all just the sunshine and the fun stuff. It's not just, oh, let's be happy, love, and connected. And it's more than that. You have to take on and take up the responsibility and the challenge of seeing and feeling what the whole world feels, what they all go through. That's what unity consciousness is. So that reflects itself in the practice. However much you expose yourself to is how much you'll be able to support. So when people come into breath work, the beautiful thing about the breath is people can never go further than their capacity allows them. In other words, I have people that come in, I can see the trauma plain as day, but sometimes they won't even touch it because they're not ready for it that day. So since it's all their own doings, they're doing it themselves. I'm not doing anything except for supporting safety, love, and unconditional acceptance. So they feel safe enough, free enough to just really open up, and they trust me enough because they see that I have the strength and the ability to hold space. And so when we do it, everyone feels held. That's the first thing, and that's the most important thing. The thing we've noticed about healing is healing only happens because of common connection, because of love, and because of trust. So when they get going in their breath, when you talk about Kundalini awakenings, that's simply an aspect of just, it's awakening to the potential, but you didn't clean out and do the work. In other words, you got to clean the house first. If you don't clean the house, if you don't rid yourself of all your sins, if you like to call them that, all that means is that one of your energy centers is being stifled by painful, traumatic energy. And if you get that off of that energy center, it opens up and comes back online and becomes a clear, bright light, starts to work correctly, starts to function properly. But it's a whole thing. It's your physical body, your etheric body, your mental body. The whole thing has to kind of go on the journey together. And we don't ever take anyone past what they can handle because they can't go further than they will allow themselves anyway. And we know, we can easily spot and tell where people need to, take it easy or push a little further or just break through the wall and get to the other side. But, a lot of that talk and that stuff, to me personally, I don't learn this stuff by someone teaching me or telling me. I go inside and I find the answers myself. I seek out the wisdom, find the way, and then turn around and do the best I can to share it with people that have asked, that want to know how to achieve the specific things that I have in my path.
Yeah, and that was my personal experience. I have never seen in the many practices I've experienced with you, I have never seen anyone leave in an ungrounded state. I've always experienced everyone getting what they needed and going as far as they were willing to dig into their own stuff and to their own psyche and consciousness. And the other side, I've come to those practices where I've been in a very grounded place and have come through stronger, more enhanced, more connected with the spark or the divine spirit, or what I interpret as the spark, how it wants to live through me uniquely. And another interesting observation I've made is you have a gift of clairvoyance. You are a seer, and you offer, in these practices, you offer the gift of sight and being with there, witnessing someone as they're going through this journey. Would you like to elaborate on how you came to harness this gift, or when you knew you could see, sense deep into a soul of someone else? And again, I'll say you've never done this without permission. You always ask permission if someone will allow you to do that. And again, I've been amazed at what you saw in me and saw the reflection of others when you show this gift and when you use this gift in this practice.
The ability to see another's experience is a universal one. As far as I can tell, it seems to be just down to how healthy the pineal gland is. Because the pineal gland is attached to the frontal olfactory bulb, which is here. You can actually look on a anatomy diagram, and it's part of our physiology. It's just been it's gotten so atrophied and so subdued over millennia, thousands of years, that it no longer functions quite as strongly as it used to. We used to actually be able to see without eyes. It was totally common to just experience your world through spiritual sight. You could see clearly. It was very normal. There's some of the things they refer to in different legends and different mythologies are referring to that very thing. Me personally, I just always remembered it from when I was little. I remembered home. I remembered father and mother distinctly. It's like I still remember seeing myself get dropped off here in a way. It wasn't necessarily dropped off, but I still remember coming. It was like I was a secret. I came under the radar. And I just never really forgot, but what I had to do is I had to do certain things like meditation and breath work to kind of get things moving again, a lot of cleansing, detoxing to get things out of the body that didn't belong there, especially when it comes to the pineal gland. But generally speaking, if the physical body is well, strong, happy, and thriving, those things will generally start to recuperate and come back online. I think most people just don't think they can see. I notice a lot of people think that it's, I saw an angel standing over there in the corner. That's not actually, it's an inside sight that you know is going on outside of you. It's not the other way around, at least not for me. And so it's a slow, gradual process of or you're already awake. So it depends on how the person is. I do have some people though that can't really see much at all. But some people are oriented differently. Some people are oriented towards feeling. Like the feminine is, they feel everything. It's like color, texture, light, warmth. It's a way of seeing through the senses rather than with the eye or the pineal gland.
Yes, and your wife, who also co-hosts these with you, I believe the two of you complement each other perfectly in the offering. You have the masculine vision and the masculine energy very strong, and you're both actually very balanced in your masculine and feminine, but that's what I feel in the offering. Her feminine, her nurturing and warmth and feeling really comes through, and you both help when someone's getting stuck. Much of the time I'd be stuck and a slower rhythm, and you would help with, again, with your push, your masculine push, and then her feminine nurturing to help whoever's working on that breath work get through that stuck place. And the seeing again, it seems almost miraculous when we have the share time at the end and people are sharing their perceptions of that, whether it be feeling or seeing, as you mentioned, the third eye opening up and having a very different kind of seeing than our physical eyes are interpreting. But the whole experience, again, just the congruence of the themes of what you will see and the other experience are quite amazing. So you mentioned again that you did this practice every day. I found this practice super intense just by the cathartic nature. So much painful stuff comes up, and again, like you said, some people are just they'll hit a wall, and it is too painful to break through. How did you manage? What got you to go through that intense practice? And it's very intense physically. It's not like a box breath, which is very relaxing and calming and relatively easy. This is intense, rhythmic, powerful breath. How were you able to do that every day for over a year?
It was actually, it was 4 years of that. Almost 4 solid years. I think I only missed like 10 days on my schedule total. But it was very brutal. And the breath that you're familiar with, the lying down circular breath, that's just phase one. And then from there, for me, that was a lot of offloading, just getting everything out, a lot of crying, a lot of sadness, a lot of fear, a lot of anger, a lot of things came out, a lot of past life traumas that were stacked up I hadn't dealt with. But then when I moved into phase two, I began the seated breath, which is same breath but seated, but I lean forward and then I come up. I breathe up as I'm leaning on the floor with my forehead on the floor. I breathe up quickly and then I hold and I come up and sit up against the wall. That one's way more challenging and that's way more advanced. And that stage there was the transition from trauma to, all right, now I'm going to start putting my armor back on or start rebuilding the temple. That's basically what that phase is. So phase one, clean out the temples, dust yourself off. Phase two, let's start rebuilding it. And phase three is you have to master phase two enough to be able to get to phase three, because you got to get to the point where when you do the holds, you don't go unconscious. You have to stay. It's like you have to thread the needle. You have to go right through the center, which is you stay conscious with the forebrain, but you start to bring the rear brain back online. The rear brain, the arbor vitae, is the tree of life. If you know your Latin, that's what that means. It's the tree of life. And so bringing that brain back online is the most challenging aspect. And it was very hard for me. I had to do it alone. I did have the support of my wife. But as far as guides and stuff, it was all here. I had to go to Father and Mother. Mother is the one guiding me now. Father has guided me in other incarnations, but this one is Mother, and she has very much done an extremely amazing job at making me safe, keeping me safe, and she has this incredible ability to catch me when I fall and when I fall hard. So when I went through the breath process of remembering it and reassembling it for myself, she was always there guiding me and giving me the cues as to how far I can go. But the thing about me is I don't have a limit. If I have a limit, then I'll fail. I have to continue to always go past any limit that's supposedly there. And with the breath, that was no different. I had to really reach down deep. And even still, some days, I have to jump back to particular types of breath to keep myself on the train track. So
you'd say this belief that even though this 3D matrix is saying you got to stop here, there's a limit, it's a belief deep down that you know you're actually limitless at the core that got you through this intense practice day in, day out for 4 years.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, in this realm, in this matrix, that's one of the things that's kind of a foregone conclusion. Anybody who's succeeded, all these individuals who have had to go through hell and come out the other side and then offer their offering, you have to give it everything you got and then more. So every time you think you got no more to give, sorry, you aren't even close. Keep giving, and then you still don't think you have any more. Well, I'm sorry, you got to keep giving. And so the not having any limits is, it's par for the course with this place. You can't back off at any interval, because the energies that oppose you, especially me, and I can't speak for everyone, but I know that they've had a hell of a time trying to make sure that I stay down, and every time they hit me even harder, so I'll stay down. But I always have to get up, dust myself off, and keep going, no matter what the odds are. And that's, I think, most of the people that do the type of work that I do, that me and my wife do, would say the same thing. You have to persevere against all odds. They have a saying, there's only one rule in success, and that is never give up. You just can't ever give up. It's not an option. You have to basically tell yourself, this thing I'm going to do, I'm either going to die trying or I'm going to succeed, because that's all there is. It won't give you any other leeway.
So in this process, did you ever find yourself repeating some of the same walls or perceived limitations when you were going in, day out? Did you go through a time when you felt like, this isn't working, I keep running into the same thing here? Did you ever feel that personally?
I did, yeah. I had a good buddy in that part of it, which is Billy Alsbrook. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a motivational speaker. And then, what's his name? Les Brown. There's another fella, I can't remember. Anyway, those motivational speakers I listened to them every single day for years, because I had to push myself through every barrier that was there. And there were days I'd sit down and do the breath work, and the day before I had just stepped right through. I had just seen the most beautiful, amazing things that you could imagine. I touched the face of God, as it were. And then the next day, just total fear or total lack of progress. And sometimes it was very frustrating. I'd hit walls that I didn't even know would be there. And the only thing that got me through was the motivation. And for me, the motivation had to be particularly strong and focused, because I learned early on in this journey that if you don't get control of this sword up here, then it'll run the rest of you into oblivion. And so I had to get control of my focus. And so your focus is your mind. Whatever you put your mind on is where you're headed, but also what you're going to get. So if you start thinking, oh, I can't do this, it's not going to work, then that's what's going to start coming to the surface. But it's never that. It's always, no, I've got this. I'm going to keep going no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes. I never give in. I never give up. And that's just that. There's no other options. And after some of the lives I've been through, those were some of the things that got me through. On top of, after all that more masculine help that I needed, then I was able to, after the strength was built up, after I got the stamina, the strength, and the perseverance built up, I was able to then segue into the softer, more gentle, no, I just got this kind of attitude, where it was more feminine. That's where my mother really started to really refine me back into joy, back into love, laughter, silliness, because to be strong doesn't mean to be rigid and forceful and powerful all the time. It means, are you really loving your life? Are you really loving what you do? Because if you're still strangling this thing to get it to work, that is not right either. So I segued into a soft, gentle, but I had to get myself strong enough to be gentle. That's probably the single most important aspect of this type of journey, is after you've done the hero's journey and you've shown what you're capable of and you've done it only for yourself, Then you segue into the more quiet, poised. And then the warrior realizes he doesn't even need to fight. He doesn't even need the sword. He is the sword. It's his way of acting in the day. It's his way of connecting with others, his way of loving others and being open to others. That's the true weapon, because you can disarm the most hurt, traumatized person by your display of unconditional love, and that's the hardest thing of all. So,
And so, would you say that's ultimately that's coming home, is connecting with unconditional love, feeling unconditional love hold space for you, and then realizing you have that capacity within you to hold space for others in this life process with that unconditional love.
yeah, unconditional love is, a lot of us have achieved some pretty extraordinary things. There's a lot of great people in this world. But the pinnacle, I feel, is unconditional love. And as I was growing up through this life, I didn't always know what it was. But as I started to get around my 30s, 40s, I started to get a real glimpse and a real look at it. But I didn't get a grip on it till I hit about 40. And I realized unconditional love isn't just love of anyone because of anything. You love them because you know there's no other alternative. And a good example of that has been my struggle with Ahriman, or the devil. That whole million-year plus hero's drama journey with him personally. He's always been my complete shadow and arch nemesis. And that process, he taught me that more than anyone else did. Mother, she just exudes it. She exemplifies it. She just is it. So it sometimes, and Father too. Father is the same way. But Ahriman, the devil, he actually forced me to look at it. And I didn't get a handle on that till just about 6 months, well, it was probably a year ago. You know that line in Arthur, I don't know if you've seen it, where he says, "You want to know where I got such drive? You did it. You made me the man I am today." A lot of the stuff they have in the movies actually is quite true about him and I. And in that respect, I had to really dig deep, because, like, let's say someone hurts you, okay? Someone hurts you, your first instinct is to either shove them away or hurt them back. That's generally, you want to get away from them, or you might want to actually lash out. But what unconditional love asks you to do is neither. It asks you to actually continue loving them. Not because self-respect and self-love isn't important, but when one masters self-love and self-respect so completely, you will understand something that only the most enlightened will understand, is that they can't harm you in the first place. So there's no need to worry about it. But there is still a need to realize that they need it. So, but to martyrdom is not right either. And I have demonstrated that myself. But I don't do that anymore because it's not constructive. People take what you do and they live by your example, and then they continue to try to repeat it. That wasn't the point of it. The reasons for some of the martyrdom was just to show that death and people's hatred and fear and pain on me wasn't sufficient to snuff me out, because they can't. I'm eternal. That was the whole point of that, not to be a martyr, not to show that, that's okay. What it was to show is to love thy enemy as thyself, because he is you. And that's the one thing. If you want the top of the pile, those are the two things. The top of the pile of enlightenment is, have you achieved unconditional love? And can you love your enemy as yourself? Will you, can you, and do you understand that the evil, or the one that everybody keeps pinning that on, is you as well, is the same. He is, if the unity consciousness is true, then he is a part of you. You can't avoid that. It's unavoidable. So by default, if you know that we're all one, then that means you have to unconditionally love yourself and the other. And it doesn't matter what other you want to talk about. And I can talk personally about him, and we'll get to that in another one of our interviews, hopefully, if we have that opportunity. But that's a whole nother realm. You talk about loving someone in spite of the worst. I know that, unfortunately, all too well. And that's where unconditional love came from is, oh gosh, well, I have my part in this too. It isn't all him. It isn't all just the devil. Yeah, he's been pretty brutal and pretty ruthless, but that's what he is. That's his very nature. So if I would have just let him be himself from the start, instead of throwing him out of heaven like I had, he would have been accepted, and there would have been an all-inclusiveness. Now, he would have eventually found his way to drive his spear home. That's unavoidable. But the point is that I learned unconditional love. I learned that he and all of creation is a part of me. And so if that's the case, then I need to love it all as it is and stop trying to change it. And that's one of the mistakes I made early on, is I tried to punish him. I tried to make what was just what it is be like me. And then he started trying to be like me, which is a whole other subject. But unconditional love is the most brutal path there is. And people think they do it, they think they act it out. But I have found that most of the time I have failed at that. Except for in extreme cases, I'm able to pull it off for some unknown reason, other than just I have to reach down so far into my soul that it comes up naturally, I suppose.
And there's so much you just said that I want to explore in future videos that I'd love to unpack and intend to unpack. But one thing I want to going back to the breath work, one thing that is guaranteed with this practice and any other practice that's going to cultivate that connection with sovereignty from within, one thing guaranteed is you will come face to face with the devil, and you will be called to understand your relationship with the devil. Am I correct on that?
Some people more than others. Some people are able to just heal traumas and past things. But anything that has to do with death, pain, suffering, agony, apathy, any form of discomfort in the being is his territory anyway. So yes, when you go into the breath work, my breath work is not for the meek by any means. It's designed to. I had to come up with and remember my old technique of refining thousands of years of hidden wisdom and knowledge into a very streamlined, simple method so that anybody can do it. And you've done it, so you know how easy it is. But I didn't want 100 different tricks to have to be performed in order to get the result. I wanted to be able to take people from where they are when they have kids and they have work and all this stuff going on, be able to take them from that place straight home, open the door for them and show them the face of God. Show them what Source is. Show them what God really is. And then once they've touched that, then I can work the path there more completely. But that question you just asked is the one thing that no one has yet still to answer, because no one wants to own up to all of it. No one wants to take full responsibility of all of it. So some people come to breathwork and they only move, this much. Some people come to breathwork and they move mountains. But if you want Source, if you want God, if you want the whole picture, you have to go through the whole picture. I have been everywhere inside of this temple. I've been in the shadows, in the nooks, and the crannies. I've been in the closets that no one has cleaned out for millennia. I have been everywhere. And so what I discovered is that all of me was inside there. And so whatever I discovered was a part of me and a part of my process. The challenge was overcoming that. And what I discovered with the devil, if we want to answer that question, those are the most hurt aspects. He's the most hurt aspect of us all. Father told me something a long time ago. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, Dad. I said, why the hell did you pick me to do this? And he said, because I knew you could do it. And no one else could do it. And he also said, because you're the only one I could trust. And I thought, okay, well, that's a lot of responsibility. But then I remember him saying, he said, if you heal yourself, you heal us all. And I didn't really get complete awareness around what that meant until I started to come into the unconditional loving territory regarding the battle with him. It's been continual and constant. And since the first engagement that we've had, he's been nothing but brutal and violent. And he's done everything he could to just torment the whole of creation. And in that process, I had to really dial in on what unconditional love really means and own up to my actions and their repercussions and the things that it would cause. So some people get more and some people get less. But if you want the whole picture, but you also want the miraculous, you have to go there, because you cannot operate this temple completely. It won't come completely online until you have cleaned out every nook and cranny. So if there's any remnant of him in there whatsoever, in other words, if you haven't healed him inside of you, you'll never see the kingdom. It'll never open and come online for you until you've done that.
Beautifully stated. So, with this type of intense work, you say this is not for the meek. Who is this practice for?
I mean, it's functional for everyone in the sense that it can do, that's the beautiful thing about the breath work, is it any stage of it will give the individual exactly what they need. But as far as taking the same trip I did, I haven't seen one person yet step up to it and grab a hold of it and do it. Not one person has gone from phase 1 of the breathwork all the way through to phase 3 or 4. So that's what I mean when I say that. But as far as the different aspects of the breath, it addresses anything anyone needs. I say it all the time to clients that, you know, if you just did just the breathwork alone, that is the answer. It will take you to the thing you're seeking. You can add yoga and all the other beautiful, wonderful practices on top of that. But the breath has to be the foundation, because the breath is creation itself. It is the source of chi or prana. It's the place where spirit comes in, it's taken into the body, and then it's exhaled what you don't need. So if you're not breathing correctly, the rest of your life is going to follow that same hesitant and shallow pattern. It's just going to mirror itself.
But let me rewind. You did say when you got stuck, you needed some motivational influence. So they're taught when you're running into the walls and you want to quit, there is value to having the right voices, right affirmations with you to keep you going.
Yeah, I used motivational. I would sit down, put my earpods in, and I would listen to motivational. That's what fueled my breath, because I always have to do I'm self-starting, self-perpetuating. I don't really have people that can do, because I'm always at the leading edge and trying to really push through the stuff that's unbearable. So yes, I had to find ways to encourage myself always forward, never back.
Yeah, so from my perspective and my experience with this, I've found the breath work to be a crucial foundational practice for awakening and sovereignty. But there are other valuable practices. When combined, you get a wonderful soup for becoming a strong, functional being.
Yeah.
And that's much of what my work is. It's about practical mysticism, understanding this ancient wisdom, but learning how to apply it in the here and now.
Yeah.
Now, I remember too, like that first breathwork session, you go right in to talking about the architect of the matrix, the architect of this illusory existence, that many people believe is the reality, this state of limitation that many believe is the state of how they truly are. And you mentioned that, and initially you said you don't want to know who this being is, but we've got to. I've found as we go on in the wisdom practices and sovereignty practices, they're full of paradox.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking about that being, and yet the necessary confrontation and understanding of that being.
Yeah, that so the short general version of it is so there's many different realms. I mean, there is realms without number. The creation or creation's ability to be limitless is truly eternal and infinite. And so in that respect, Father, Mother, and I, and others, but Father, Mother, and I have created many, but this realm, after being created, it was a realm created to kind of bring all of it together in one place, in sharp focus, so that the beings that are a part of all the creations could come in and experience and witness what it's all about. It's like you have a whole bunch of different realms, and they all have a different function, or they all have a different kind of trajectory, or palette, if you want to call it that. It's like each creation is wholly different and unique, but perfect nonetheless in itself. But what happens is, if you create perfection, and you create and you create and create, eventually you start to run out of ingredients in your cupboard. And then pretty soon all you're left with is the things that are less and less seemingly perfect. So I'm an eternal being. In my book, I will be referring to being created or being born per se, but not like the context of what humans think of that as. Simply hopping from age to age, eon to eon, epoch to epoch. We're talking about limits of time that are unfathomable, but I am my Father, but each time I come through an age, I'll demonstrate myself and my nature in a new way. It's just how it works. And so in the sense of that, this was already created. But then he, Aruman, the one everyone calls the devil, he was actually the first being created here, the first mortal. And so he started...
Let me stop you right there. I want to save this deep dive. I know I just asked the question, but I want to save a deep dive into Ahriman with the demiurge, the creator of the Matrix, and the many different expressions of that for another conversation. So let me end this. If you could leave anyone who watches this a final thought regarding breathwork practice, anything you want to leave people with, what do you want to say? How would you leave it?
I guess with the most important things, the breath work, the information, the story that I just shared, the memories from past lives, the constant battle with him. What really matters to me the very most is, I see everybody right now is shouting from the rooftops about the problem, right? And I know all the problems quite clearly and complete. And I've taken great time and I've gone to great lengths to validate, verify, and corroborate all of the stuff that is going on, and to match it up with my experiences from the past and the current times I'm in now. But more importantly, I want to do my best to help people with the solutions. and breathwork being one. Breathwork is actually for me, it was the solution because it's what took me home again. If people go home again, they don't need to worry about the rest, the dying and the chaos and the cataclysms and all the end time stuff that's coming. They don't need to worry about that if they know where home is, if they know what God truly is, the full extent of that expression, because that's not even the correct word. I only use that word because people here have adopted that word as their version of what mother and father are, and that's what mother and father are, but I call them my mother and my father. Abba and Amma is my old ancient favorite terms for them, but I want people to have grounded, practical solutions to the problems they're facing now, the ones they will be facing shortly. But more importantly, I want all of you viewers to know that this process it's understandable. There is a foundational truth. There's a lot of information out there, but I've gone to a great lengths to distill it all down to something that's simple, make sense of all the myths and legends and scriptural narratives, but also what I really want to do is just share my experience and my point of view, because really that's all we all have is our own individual experiences. And so I just thought by sharing and by being completely open, I want to share past memories. I want, if you have questions about lives or the journey, all the things we've talked about, those are the things that matter, because people need to be able to relate. And if they can relate to something, if they can relate to an experience that someone else had, then they have a chance at overcoming the challenges that they have. And really, I am completely happy in my life and doing what I'm doing. I just felt it was finally time to do something to set the record straight so that people aren't so confused by what's going on out there. But more importantly, just like with the breathwork, to be there for these people, to be there for you, the viewers, because being alone in this place and not knowing what is really going on is extremely scary and painful right now. And so I want to make sure that I do my best to deliver that content best I can.
Beautiful. Well, Jonathan, I want to go in depth in conversations and learn more about these visions of past lives, the concepts of mother and father you referred to in this conversation. I want to go deep and explore that more in the future. But for now, where can people find you?
I'm not too visible yet. I've got a website. It's ArcSource One. I am working on my presence in some of the social media platforms. I do have a Facebook page, ArcSource One, there as well. And I will begin developing more and more places where I can actually interact with the viewers and stuff. Especially, I want you to leave comments and questions in the chat on the bottom of this video, because, just like you had said before we started, what really matters is the experience of the people out there, what their experience, their questions, what's troubling them, what they need answers and help with. Because at the end of the day, community is what it's all about, and being together in this thing is what it's all. Like you say, you're a warrior of truth. I think we all need to strive to be like that with your attitude on that, because if we all do that more together with each other and realize that the differences are just defined by pain and fear and lack, but if we have the courage and the strength to demonstrate that we are all in this together and that we all do care about each other, then things will really start to change. And that's what I want the community to be about. That's why I want the comments in the chat, because it helps me to know not only what, the questions that you bring, but also the questions what the viewers bring, what they want to hear more about. And then we can share more of that content as we move along.
I'm all game. So Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your soul, your practice, your wisdom, all that you are, all that you bring to this life, the gift that you are. It's a blessing to be your friend and brother.
Thank you. You too, man. It's been amazing.
And I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
Me too. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.